Welcome to AHRC TV's weekly roundup. In this week's program, AHRC TV brings you the following stories. Call for fair trial of military personnel who opened fire on Papua community. Relief still needed for more than 2.8 million people after huge earthquake. President Aquino's promises failed to tackle problems on the institutions of justice. Hong Kong drops to a new low in press freedom global rankings. Hundreds of NGOs affected as Lango law is passed. Family petitions for dead family member to be reduced. Welcome to AHRC TV's weekly roundup. I'm Christine Leung. This week's roundup begins in the Papua province of Indonesia, where allegations of severe violation of human rights against the indigenous people have occurred. To date, the Law Enforcement Agency and the National Commission on Human Rights have still not conducted a proper investigation into prosecuting perpetrators of the crime. The reason the communist HAM has given is that it does not have sufficient funds to run the investigation. On December 8, 2014, WWO military personnel abused their power against 3 teenagers, kicking and beating one of them until he began to bleed and finally fainted. Residents had to bring the teenager to hospital. The next morning, residents of Paniai demanded the military take responsibility for the events of the night before. Unexpectedly, the military and police opened fire on the residents, resulting in the death of 5 people and severe injury to 17 others. On January 9, 2015, the monitoring team of the National Commission on Human Rights found 4 allegations of serious violations of human rights by the police and military, namely, violation of the right to life, persecution, violation of the protection of the right to child, and lastly, right to security. While the monitoring team has come up with these allegations, it is important to note that there has been no field investigation. The inquiry team, known as KPP-HAM, was established on May 7, 2015 to follow up results of the monitoring team on the specific Paniai case. However, it is yet to conduct field investigations. Last month, Communist HAM has stated that funds are insufficient to do such an investigation in Paniai, Papua province. Such a reason for a lack of investigation has angered and caused significant public protests from the community. Thus, the Independent Student Forum, mostly comprised of indigenous Papuan students, has managed to collect 608,000 Indonesian rupees and have given the money to an official of Communist HAM Papua so that KPP-HAM can finally begin their investigation. This attack needs to be thoroughly investigated to ensure the military and police officers that committed murder be held accountable for their actions. The National Commission of Human Rights' lack of funds to conduct an appropriate investigation highlights the injustice of the government system against the Papuan people.
Paniai case is not the first case in Papua, but also conduct many cases in Papua, but sometimes our finding is not going to the court. So I think this case is very important for the victim to get the justice. While when we conduct the investigation, we cannot receive the money, the money from donors or from the public, because when we conduct the investigation, the funds should be from the government's budget. But in this month, our budget is very limited, and because we have another team, for example, so we have another team in other area in Indonesia. But still, maybe next month we try to fix our budget to conduct visiting location. Maybe next month the team will visit the Paniai. For the victims, they want the justice. For the Komnas HAM, we will focus on how to find the perpetrator. This is very important for the Komnas HAM, and then how to bring the perpetrator to the court.
As far as I know, there is no action from the police or the state actor. About the Paniai case. They said they have no budget about to conduct the investigation and to conduct the report, the final report. until now, I didn't see any progress. I mean, it's not about when or where, but people here, we need justice. So when they start today, tomorrow, or next year, not a problem for us. But the problem is we need justice. So the investigation should deliver justice for us. Said about the freedom of expression for West Papuan people, because sometimes they denied all of the demonstration held by the West Papuan. They arrest people who join the demonstration, but in the remote area, I think it's very, very terrible, because we cannot monitor how many people killed there, and how the police and military behavior there, because we got many reports about the police or military arrest and harass people there, in the remote area, and no media make any publication about that.
Next, the program moves to Nepal. Since the devastating earthquake that struck on April 25th, more than 8,700 people have died. There have been many efforts made by several organizations to help those in need and to alleviate the mental damage induced. Radio Nepal, along with UNICEF Nepal, created a radio program that airs several times a day in order to reduce the mental impact of the earthquake. During the show, callers can ask questions to which health professionals respond. With a large population in Kathmandu still residing in tents, there have also been group therapy sessions led by the Women's Rehabilitation Center for Women. Despite all of these efforts, according to the UN Resident Coordinator, 2.8 million people are still in dire need of different kinds of aid. Gurung, a worker for the Transcultural Psychosocial Organization, says there have already been cases of suicide as well as post-traumatic stress disorder. AHRC's Dr. Rajat Mitra is this week conducting a 3-day meeting for a group of civil society activists in Nepal to provide them with training in how to understand traumatized earthquake victims and provide them with counseling. In next week's program, AHRC TV will report further on this meeting. On the eve of the Philippine President's annual State of the Nation address, migrant workers and human rights campaigners on Philippines in Hong Kong held a protest and public event. The event was hosted by Bagong Aliansang Makabayan Hong Kong. In this event, dubbed as State of the Migrants Address, AHRC's Danilo Reyes spoke on the absence of protection from the government not only for Filipino migrants, but also for the families they left behind at home. Reyes has drawn attention to the failure of the country's justice institutions to punish the police, military, and public officials who commit gross violations of rights. None of those charged for torture, enforced disappearances, and extrajudicial killings during Aquino's term has been convicted for their crimes. During Aquino's term, the AHRC published special reports in March 2011 on the implementation of anti-torture law, and in September 2013 on the cases of targeted attacks on human rights and political activists. None of the perpetrators have been convicted. Despite the enactment of numerous human rights laws, notably against enforced disappearances, Reyes noted that Aquino failed to transform his pledges into practice. Police and soldiers who commit crimes are not punished, but rather promoted to higher ranks. The AHRC has stated that Aquino has failed to tackle problems on the institutions of justice, the police, prosecution, and the judiciary under his watch. These remain the main obstacles to achieving justice and accountability in the Philippines. On to Hong Kong, where the city has recently dropped to an unprecedented low on the latest Reporters Without Borders Global Ranking Index on freedom of the press. Hong Kong is ranked 70 out of 180 countries, having dropped 52 places in the last 10 years. As stated by Reporters Without Borders, the index is determined based on a range of criteria that include media pluralism and independence, respect for the safety and freedom of journalists, and the legislative, institutional, and infrastructural environment in which the media operate. Reoccurring instances of censorship, violence, and intimidation towards journalists, as well as China's increasing influence, have contributed to restrictions on press freedom. Reporters Without Borders have cited events such as the knife attack on Kevin Lau, the former editor of newspaper Ming Pao and allegations of media self-censorship in reports of the Occupy Central demonstrations. Next week's Roundup will feature a more extensive report on press freedom issues in Hong Kong. Moving on, the AHRC revisits events in Cambodia, where the Senate has passed the Lango Law on July 24th. Prime Minister Hun Sen of the Royal Government of Cambodia has stated that the law is necessary to prevent funding from terrorist groups and money laundering. Particularly concerning is that the Lango Law is only one of 6 laws that have been or are likely to be passed that will considerably affect fundamental human rights in Cambodia. Hundreds of local and international human rights organizations, the UN, and the European Union have all opposed Lango to no avail. Community forums and protests were held against the law but were shut down by the police. With the enactment of the Lango Law, the government has unrivaled dominance to control the rights of citizens and their freedoms. Seen as progressively authoritarian, this Cambodian state sees NGOs dealing with legal and human rights as unwanted opposition. The law will ultimately inhibit the operations of grassroots groups, organizations with restricted resources, and informal networks. Many clauses in the Lango Law contradict the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights as well as Cambodia's very own constitution. AHRC TV interviews AHRC Director of Policy and Programs, Basil Fernando, to hear more on this issue.
On the 14th of July, the National Assembly of Cambodia passed a law known as the Law on Associations and Non-Governmental Organizations, known popularly as Lango. Now, this law's aim is to stop funding for local and national civil society organizations. This will virtually, as observers have pointed out, suppress the civil society development in Cambodia. In 1993, when an internationally sponsored election was held in Cambodia, the hope was that there will be a new dawn of democracy and rule of law in Cambodia. And the new constitution declares Cambodia as a liberal democracy. What this particular law does is to stop that whole process of democratization by virtually suppressing the voice of people. On very particular aspect that this law will affect is the problem of land grabbing, which is one of the great problems that has been affecting Cambodia for several years now. The land of the people are handed over to big corporations without any kind of law and any kind of process or compensation or alternative lands for the poor. The protest of the poor was given expression to by many organizations, both local organization and international organization. The purpose of this law is to stop any kind of discussion of this tremendous problem that is faced by the poor when their lands are grabbed unlawfully by the government. People's Party of Cambodia has consistently attempted to suppress the democratization of Cambodia. This law should be resisted by all, particularly all human rights organizations throughout the world.
The program ends in Pakistan, where the dead body of Raja Dahir, who was abducted by Pakistan Ranger personnel on June 4th, has been found dumped in a deserted location on July 4th. Raja Dahir was the General Secretary of JSMM, a Sindhi nationalist party. A herdsman found the corpse and then informed the police. As per the post-mortem report, the Dahir's body bears 2 gunshot wounds on the forehead and there are torture marks. Because of pressure from the security establishment, the judicial magistrate is currently refusing an application from the family to disinter the body for proper burial. Following his abduction, Dahir's father and wife had filed a petition in the Sindh High Court in Karachi. During the last hearing in June, the court ordered the police and the rangers to produce the missing man before the court by June 26th. 2 hearings of the petition had been held in the High Court, while the next hearing was scheduled for August 6th. Law enforcement agencies are known to use the tactic of dumping dead bodies of missing persons to scare the family not to pursue the case. That is all for this weekly roundup. For more on these and other issues, please visit www.humanrights.asia. Thank you for watching and see you next week.